A very good afternoon to you and welcome to another edition of Tough Enough here on Channel 2 Safe TV Guyana. We want to thank you for staying tuned and to the station and to being a part of our discussions here on Safe TV 2 Tough Enough program. This is season 2. We are starting season 2 of Tough Enough here on this station, and we want to thank you for all of those persons who are wondering if it's going to be back or if it's not going to be back. Well, it's back, and we want to thank you for your concerns and for being a part of this great program. To start off on this season 2, I have with me Dr. David Hinds. He is an executive member of the WPA, and also he also do commentary here on Safe TV2 Headline News. So Dr. Hinds, welcome to Tough Enough this afternoon, sir.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thanks for inviting me to come again.
Well, that's great. We also want to let you know, welcome Dr. Hinds. We also want to let you know, those who are viewing the program, you can tell your friends about it. And we also live streaming our program on Safe TV2 Guyana, safetvguyana.com. So you can log on to safetvguyana.com, scroll down at the bottom of the screen, and you're going to see our live show link. You can click there and you're on to us wherever you are in the world. Dr. Hinds, let's go straight into it. Since the coalition government is one year old, everyone is wanting to know if the good life, really beckons for them, or is it that they are handling the governance and policy issue with a weight over their necks? So the question is, what is the government doing right, and what is the government doing wrong in terms of the whole thing about their governance and their time in office for 1 year? What are you seeing? What is it that you're observing that they're doing right or wrong?
Well, I think the performance of the government has to be seen within the context of the challenges that it met when it came into office. We can't talk about what the government is doing in isolation. But also, we have to take into consideration the context in which the government came to power. Coming into power after 23 years of one government, but a tumultuous 23 years, in which Guyanese people generally, some more than others, were beginning to feel that they were not part of the country, and that is significant.
Yes.
When people in a country begin to feel that they're not part of a country, then you have serious alienation. And because of the alienation, people then would have great expectations of the government that replaces that other government.
Right.
It means, therefore, that that government that is coming in has to see itself not just as your run-of-the-mill government that comes in after the other one had 1 term or 2 terms, but it has to see itself in transformational terms, in the sense that people vote for transformation insofar as it's possible to do that, right? That the state had gotten out of control, that corruption had gotten out of control, that violence had become prevalent in every level of our society. Crime had gotten out of, and the country had become, if you will, out of control. And so therefore it meant that when people voted out that government, they're voting in a government that in their mind will turn its face against everything that the previous government stands for.
Correct.
All right? And so therefore there's the expectation of a transformation. There's also the expectation of people's material circumstances. Now, that preceded the PPP, because ever since independence, we have been grappling with the question of people's material circumstances, in the sense that the vast number of Guyanese 50 years after independence are still poor. Now, we have made strides since independence, but in the final analysis, we have not really dented poverty and want. People are still find it very difficult to work. 40% of our young people are unemployed. And even when people are employed, the wages are not living wages, and so people tend to measure politics within the context of their own material circumstances, and that certainly has been one of the expectations of people have of this government. Now, having said that, as what is the government doing right and what is the government doing wrong? It's easy to talk about what a government does wrong, right?
Of course.
Because government, by very nature, does wrong things, right? But it's more difficult to talk about what a government does right. I mean, what is it that constitutes right, and what is it that constitutes wrong? It's easy to define that, but what constitutes right? It seems to me, therefore, that what the government has done in its first year is that it has brought back a sense of stability to the country. All right? It has given the country a sense of hope. It has delivered basic things that governments are supposed to do. Your governments are supposed to ensure that there is water, that there is infrastructure, repair, that people get the basic things, health care, and so on and so forth. I think insofar as this government is concerned, they have done well in that regard. But those are things that governments are supposed to do.
Expected to do.
All right? Now, so, you know, you had local government elections, for example, which we did not have for 20-odd years. A crime, they were silent, what they call cold cases. Some of them are being solved now by this, under this administration. So there are certain administrative things that the government is doing. The government came in and we were challenged by Venezuela in a very aggressive way, right? And the government was able to weather that storm and to beat back that attack by Venezuela. So in many regards, they've done well. No, I wouldn't say about what they've done wrong. I would characterize it this way. I will talk about some of the things that they do not get, I think, in my view. And one of the things I think it has to do with an overall vision of where you're walking, where you're taking this country, right? What do you want to see? Now, there's a catchphrase of the good life. But the good life has to be put in larger terms. Good life for whom? Right? Is it good life for the rich and the powerful? Is it a good life, the good life for poor people, ordinary people? Are you tackling poverty in head on? Are you dealing with educational reform head on? Because if you're talking about eradicating poverty, if you're talking about reforming education, if you're talking about improving healthcare, you're talking about a vision for the poor, lifting the poor up, right? Now, I don't think the government has spent enough time articulating that.
Why is that
right?
so?
No, I think part of it has to do with the nature of the government itself. It's a coalition government, it includes various forces. And so it's not a cohesive government. And so articulating a cohesive policy becomes very difficult. I think that's a major part of it. Another part of it, I think, has to do with where the Caribbean is at the moment. You see, over the last 30 years or so, the Caribbean has become a political space in which we have stopped using our imagination. Now, whatever you said about the early independence generation, the Williams, the Manleys, the Burnhams, Jagans, etc., they did some things that were undesirable. But one of the things you can't fault them with is that they had a sense of where they wanted to take.
There was a roadmap.
Yes, they had a sense. They had a vision. More than a roadmap. A roadmap arises out of the vision. They had a vision of where they wanted to take the society. I mean, take Burnham's National Service and the education reform, feed clothes and all yourself. That was part of a larger vision of transforming a colonial society, a colonial plantation plantation society into a viable society. Now, you can argue about whether what they did, whether they did wrong or right, but what they did have a vision. Now, what has happened over the last 30 years is that our politics, our politics in the Caribbean have veered away from a politics of vision. Right? And a lot of it has to do with the new structural adjustment that has been introduced into the Caribbean. So that the president and the prime minister is no longer a leader. He's expected to be a manager. Right? And there's a difference between a manager and a leader. A manager manages something, a leader inspires people and inspires managers. And so we have moved away to this kind of technocratic thing where the leader is no longer the leader is a manager. We have moved into this era where individualism is seen as the way to go and not the collective. So it is not about Guyana. It's not about what we can do for Guyana. It is not what we can do for the community. It is about what we as individuals can do. Now, that has a lot to do, that exists not only among the masses, it exists at the level of leadership. So we have politicians who are coming into the system who are less concerned about a larger vision for all of us and are more concerned about managing capital. You know, how much foreign direct investment we can get. Not really seeing that foreign direct investment, for the most part, benefits the investor. And so what is your vision? What is your policy about encouraging small businesses in your country, right? Their small businesses will benefit those poor people, and it will create an indigenous part of our economy, all right? So we have a rising out of this whole neoliberal structural adjustment, foreign directed kind of thing, this whole politics of management rather than a politics of leadership and vision for the poor. And so I think part of what this new government has fallen into, it is that whole notion, right, that our politics are no longer about transforming the society, it's about managing the society. And I think that we have to be very careful in the Caribbean, and since we're talking about Guyana, we have to sound that bell that nowhere in the Caribbean, nowhere in the post-plantation and post-colonial society, as that whole thing about management as opposed to leadership work. We tried it first here in the Caribbean with Edward Seaga in Jamaica, who came to power after Michael Manley's visionary democratic socialist experiment. Mr. Seaga came in and said, you know, I am the great manager, I can manage. And within 9 years, the Jamaican people found out that, and he found out that you can manage, but when it comes to transforming the society, management doesn't work. So I think that is one of the things that we have here in this country. And I say it, as I always say, with love, because I think there's tremendous pressure on those who are running the ship of state, those who are running the government. There's tremendous pressure, and a lot of these people I know, and I know they're sincere, they're trying their best and so forth. But I think that I must say in the tradition, the radical tradition of Guyana and the Caribbean, I must ask questions of power. I have no choice. That is the tradition that I come from. So I'm asking questions of my friends. I'm asking questions of this government. And I'm saying that watch yourself with that managerial thing, right? Move back to the politics of transformation, the politics of vision, the politics that talks about lifting the poor and the powerless from where they are. Because if you lift the poor and the powerless, you'll lift in the country, because they are the majority. And so therefore I think the government will have to do some work in that. And let me say this before I shut up on this issue. A lot of people meet me and they say, David, you know, it's only 1 year, give them a chance. And I am really sympathetic to that argument, because 1 year used to be a short time. But in today's Caribbean politics, 1 year is a long time. And let me explain why. Okay. In Jamaica, right, the JLP came in, they served 1 term. The people kicked them out. Portia Simpson came in with the PNP, she spent 1 term, they kick her out, and now the JLP is back. In Trinidad, the People's Partnership came in, 1 term, they kicked them out. Just the other day in St. Lucia, right, the Labour Party came back to power, 1 term, kicked them out. put a new one now, right? In Grenada, right? The NDC came in one term, they kicked them out. It means, therefore, that this whole notion that 1 year is a short time, for people 1 year becomes a hard time. So what you have to do in 1 year, you had the luxury of doing it in 5 years in the old days. Now, people are looking at these governments and they're saying, we want to see transformation. We want to see you do something big, something that can give us hope for the future. No, I don't think people are expecting the government to suddenly fill their pockets with money and all that kind of thing. I think in the final analysis, what people are looking for is a government to signal. If you're dealing with corruption, as I think that this government has the greatest opportunity to stamp out corruption, and if you were to stamp out, if the government, I know we're going to talk about that, and so in a sense I'm prefacing it, right? But if this government were to, in its first year, if it had tackled corruption in an aggressive way, the negatives that people are talking about for this government would have vanished, because they would have signaled to the people and given the people confidence that they're serious. You can't do everything, but if you're taking that one thing and you said, we are going to go aggressively after this, people then would balance that with your shortcomings. In the absence of a big and overriding intent on the part of government, I think it undermines itself. It undermines the very good things.
I hear what you're saying, because I like the reference you made to Trinidad, Jamaica, Dominica, St. Vincent, all of these governments that run for one term and get kicked out because probably they did not follow, they did not build on their promises that they had made to the people that voted for them back then. So they got kicked out. So the question is, this government need to watch themselves.
Well, those of us who love this government would like to say that to this government. I just came off a program 2 hours ago in Antigua talking about 2 years in office of the Antigua Labour Party, and we were making this very point because a lot of the promises in Antigua, for example, they promised to get rid of the personal income tax, which they did the other day. Now, having gotten rid of the personal income tax, they raise sales taxes, they raise, and the people end up spending more money, paying more taxes. When the government admit, they put the figure that people will be paying $10 a month more. Now economists are saying it's much more than that. The fact of the matter is, you say you're getting rid of people's taxes, right? But and now what has happened is that people have to pay taxes in other ways, and there were poor people who did not pay any taxes because of their low income. Now they have to pay sales tax and so forth. I'm giving that example, and I'm very serious about this, Andrew. You know why? Because we here in Guyana have developed a kind of inward sense of ourselves. It's only about Guyana. It's only about our politics, and we don't pay attention to what is going on around us, which impact us. And so, pardon me, the audience, if I use the Caribbean and use examples from the Caribbean, it's only to say that we in Guyana are not an island, although we behave like an island. All right. So there is a way in which young people who are coming in, they don't know about Burnham and Jagan, and I don't think they care much about those things. There, if you're 18 years old, you are judging your existence based on what is going on now. And so, as a government, you have to be cognizant of that. So you've got to balance what you're doing.
Guyana is going to be co-hosting the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting very soon, and I trust that some of these same matters are going to be raised at this CARICOM meeting, because most of the time when you have CARICOM Heads of Government meetings, there's a talk shop. Nothing will really be done, and a lot of persons are still asking the question, is CARICOM really viable? Are they still really necessary? The question was asked to Mr. Granger when we had our public interest show discussion, and he's saying CARICOM is still viable, it's still needed. What are your thoughts on that?
It is still necessary. I say without any hesitation.
Why?
That if these little countries in the Caribbean are to survive, if the vast majority of working people in these islands are to live as real human beings, we can only do so as a united Caribbean. Whether we have one government or we have several governments in a functional cooperation, we have to have regional integration. I don't see, no, that is not new. Scholars and thinkers were saying that since independence. Remember, we had the West Indies Federation between 1958 and 1962. So that we are going nowhere. You know, Mr. Burnham said, we either live together, or swim together, or drown, something to that effect. And you know, the point is that as individual nation states, we are easy pickings for global capital. As individual nation states, we are not able to defend ourselves as vigorously against those who David Rudder said don't need islands no more. There was a time when they needed our islands for sugar and banana and bauxite and so on and things. They don't need our islands for that anymore. Now they need our islands in order to strengthen their own hold on the thing. They need our islands and our small countries to pour cheap goods into a country so that food comes from overseas very cheap, but it's bad food. Right? And so we say, good, oh Lord, cheap food comes from Europe and America, but it's bad food. And so economists tell us it is more reasonable and more efficient and more economically sound to buy food rather than plant food and grow food, because it's more expensive to grow food than to buy it. What they're not telling us is that the food that we're buying cheaply are the bad food that then affects the overall general health of the population. And if you don't have an healthy population, you don't have a productive society, and so therefore you're in serious trouble.
And just to point out something here, the 100 days in government for the AP and AFC, some of the things that may have been accomplished, reduction in the bridge budget, in the bridge toll, that is being done, and that was a controversy in that as well. Significant salary increase for government workers, including nurses, teachers, primary schools to secondary school, tertiary education, security personnel, civil servants on the traditional payroll matter. That is still to be partially done. Immediate implementation, phase reduction on VAT, and removal of VAT from the food and other essential items. That is in discussion. They're still talking about that. Significant increase in old age pension. That has been done in the last budget, mentioned and passed and implemented. Reduction of the president's pension and other benefits will be recommended and referred to. That also has taken place. Establishment of passport and birth certificate licensing officers in Barbados, Secretary and Linden. That is something that also the Minister of Citizenship, the minister there, Felix has put in his hand on that. Return of television stations to Linden and other places. You've seen the president moving around, open a station recently, Region 1, in other parts of the country, a station there, there as well. You've seen the waiving of duties on fuel, oil, and some small-scale mining equipment brought. Identifiable holders of small concessions, that is also, so as you said, they are accomplishing certain things, but
yes, they're accomplishing things, and we have to
acknowledge
that. But you have to make the case to the ordinary man and woman out there that all these things you've accomplished have some kind of impact on their daily lives, and that is how they're ultimately not going to be judged by a list of things that you've. That is for people like us and you and me and so on and thing. For the ordinary person on the ground, they're going to judge your performance based on how does it affect their material and other circumstances in their little villages, in their little wards, in the town. When they look around, do they see an increase in employment? Do they see a decrease on dropouts from schools? That is how they ultimately are going to measure you. So it is about how you take all of these things, link them together, and inform the people about how it's showing them how it's affecting their lives. I think that's the challenge that this government faces.
Even that said, you speak about local government just now. Local government is over, and the different management in the NDCs are taking over. They're managing their constituencies and so on. But they have met up with the same problem the government.
Well, yes, because you haven't changed the system. You have had local government elections, but you've not changed the relationship between local government and central government.
That's it.
You have not empowered the local authorities to do things, and critically, and Mr. Granger, I know he has spoken about this, but critically, there is no autonomy as far as the neighborhood councils and so on are for generating their own funds in order to do things. So, yes, we have had local government elections, big star,
Yes.
right? Have we changed the local government culture? Have we changed the relationship? That is yet to be seen. But more importantly, and I say this advisedly, one of the things that has hampered local governance in this country from 1994 to the present is corruption.
Oh yeah,
There's,
big.
again, President Granger is quite correct. Corruption is not just at the upper echelons in government and so on. It's also the low level.
Yes.
It's also in the wider society. And so, therefore, corruption was one of the big things that hampered government. What are we doing? See, that's why I go back to corruption. If we tackle corruption and we contain corruption, we then enhance the quality of governance that you get in the country, so that the chairman of the Neighborhood Democratic Council would then have to account more, and all those things about giving contracts and getting kickback from the contracts and so on. There's a culture of that throughout the local government system, and you are not going to get effective local government until you remove that kind of corruption from the system. I look at the Georgetown City Council and the controversy over the meters. They seem, what I'm reading from what I'm hearing is that, look, there is no transparency in the awarding of contracts. We have the deputy mayor saying, I don't think that company has a track record, and then the rest of the council, represented by the mayor, basically saying to him, shut up, you know what I mean, and so on. So I'm not accusing anyone of corruption in this new council. What I'm saying is that if you inherit a system that functioned in that way, you begin to resemble the system. So what we have to do is to really get rid of, and that is why I'm so strong, Andrew, on this question of dealing with corruption. I don't concern about PPP and all of that kind of stuff. Governments come and government go. What I'm concerned about is putting a brake on corruption, because all that money, all those resources that are being siphoned off into private hands, if we were to get those resources and invest them in education, invest them in small businesses for poor people in Beirut, in Port Morant, in Buxton, in Plaisance, in Dartmouth, on the West Coast, in Denhamstel, in Stewardville, in Iflot and those places, all of our people in the Amerindian areas, if all that money that are being siphoned off, if we use those monies and invest them in our people, we would be on our way to beginning to solve the problem of underdevelopment and want.
The good life will beckon, because I can tell you, because I am a council myself in our NDC.
Yes, congratulations.
And I have seen the level of corruption when we start to look at the budget and the spending of the council. Then you get to realize what really transpired 23 years ago.
Yes. You see,
terrible.
Here's the web of corruption.
It's terrible.
If the big ones want to steal millions and billions, they facilitate the small ones to thief a couple of $1,000. So the man at the bottom get a kickback for $100,000 to $200,000. He feels good because it makes a difference in his life. He or she feels good, but you facilitate that low-level corruption so that the top can become corrupt, and then the people at the bottom say, well, let the man alone. Let the man, the man gotta live, the man gotta look after himself.
Yeah.
Because they themselves have become part of this cynical web of corruption. That's what I'm interested in. You know, look, people know that people know that I speak up for black people in this country. But I don't want black people to be corrupt people. I don't want black people to condone corruption, right? And I'm going to speak out on that, you know. I don't want black people to develop and foster bad habits just for the sake of survival. And so therefore, for me, corruption has no racial boundaries. All right, corruption is something that we have to deal with. Our small society, when you misappropriate $500 million, that's a big chunk of money for small economies like Guyana.
And you're talking about $1 billion because the other question that jumps straight to my mind is this $1 billion in matter of fact spending on Gaisuku. The president talked about it. He said we have to deal with the problem, deal with the matter of Gaisuku because they are, giving Gaisuku $10 billion plus a year, where the money could go to.
Yes,
development.
but Andrew, it's a politics. If this government were to move aggressively to do what is necessary to be done in the sugar industry, they will be accused of racism.
Well,
because exactly, because the vast majority of workers in the industry are Indian Guyanese, and so therefore the sugar becomes an economic football, political football. If we can explain and reason with the sugar workers to say, if we implement these reforms now, in 5 years, in 10 years, you would be benefiting more than you're benefiting now. All right? And we will be able to pay better wages because the cost of production will go down. You see, you have to reason with people. I don't think this government has done enough of that, right? I mean, that's one of my pet things.
So you're saying that the process that they went ahead on in this old Gaisuku sugar industry was the wrong way?
No. What I'm saying is that the government ultimately, whether it's this government or the one that succeeds it, some of us will hope not, right? The government has to do something about Gaisuku that is drastic. We've known that all along, right? However, governments are hamstrung. The PPP wouldn't do it because they support them. They fear that if they do that, their supporters will turn against them. This government can do it in the same in a drastic way because they will then be charged of racism and so forth. But it has to be done. So my point is that what government needs to do is to have a national conversation about sugar, where you go into the sugar communities and the rest of the country and talk about what needs to be done in sugar to benefit this country. Because if we can reform the sugar industry, if we can diversify the sugar industry, ultimately the sugar worker will benefit. But we have to make that case. And I know it's difficult. What I'm saying, this government has not done a good job of making the case to people. You know, it's not just on sugar, it's on everything. Right? On everything. Gold. You have got to go out there and reason with people. The vendors fiasco in Georgetown, which I think was an injustice done to those poor people who are trying to hustle a living out there and so on. No, have they kept the place clean? No. Have they have criminals and crime been harbored? Yes. Right? Do we need to correct that? Yes. But do we need to, in a summary way, go after people and tell them you all got to move, and if you don't move, we will move you all, and so on? I see something in the newspaper today that the vendors are complaining that their revenue have been understandably so. And so my point is that had you gone to those people and said, reason with them, say, hey, brethren, here, sis, look, you're making a little living here. You're keeping your family afloat, all right? But we got to regularize this thing. We got to clean up this place. We got to make conditions better for you in the long run. Let's reason how together we can do these things. I tell you, if I'm an expert on anything, it's on poor people because I'm born and grow in that environment. And they could be contrary. But when you sit down and you reason with them, as the Rasma would say, show them the citation, right? Ultimately, they come around. Because our people are not bad behavior. I mean, you know, we do some unseemly things, but ultimately Guyanese are very, very, very mannerly people. We got a lot of manners in this country. The people in the rest of the Caribbean laugh us. They say the most docile slaves and indentured servants came here. And they're saying that in, you know, as a joke. But what it points to is the fact that Guyanese people could reason. And I think not only this government, we have not reasoned enough with our people as it relates to changes that have to be taken in this country.
Well, there you have it. If you just join us, you're looking at Tough Enough, our second season here on Channel 2, and we're talking with Dr. Hinds. He's giving us his analysis on some of the topical issues that have come out so far since the AP and EFC government has been in office for 1 year. We are also streaming live on our website, that is safetvguyana.com, and you can tell your friends across the globe that they can check on our website, click on the link at the bottom that mark live shows here, and you can get onto the show in real time. As well, Dr. Hinds, I want to jump to another issue that has come up to the fore, which is the Venezuela situation. Venezuela, human crisis that's facing the country. I asked the president this question. I asked them, I need to play it so that you can hear it, and you're going to come back and talk about it and give us your thoughts on it. Dominic, you can play that clip for us there.
We have not contemplated the possibility. Venezuela has not made a request to us, and I'm sure if they needed assistance and they asked our help, we would consider it. But we mustn't exaggerate. We don't know the exact situation in that country. We know about newspaper reports. There are some shortages, but the Venezuelan economy is not on the point of collapse. There are shortages because of the inability to buy goods in the world market, particularly household goods. Day-to-day requirements in homes, foodstuff and so on. But the country is not on the brink of collapse.
Now, on the Tough Enough show last Thursday, I asked the president the question if he's willing to provide humanitarian aid to Venezuela. That's the answer he gave pertaining to, he said, if the Venezuelan ask for it, he will provide it. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with the president. I agree with the president. We can't not come to the aid of the Venezuelan people if they're in need of aid and if the government asks for aid. We're the neighbors, and there are repercussions if that country disintegrates. There are repercussions for us because we are next door. People could pour into the country. We can hardly deal with what we have here, but also the fact that our people go to other countries, we really can't say no and so forth. So we're in a really tough position. So I agree with the president that if asked, we will have to go. But I think the president is, in that comment, is sounding the warning that disintegration of or crisis in the Venezuelan economy is not necessarily the same thing when we say crisis in the Guyanese economy. We're talking about a massive economy there in relationship to Guyana and so forth. We also have to take into consideration the way in which forces that are hostile to the Chavez's legacy would play up the difficulties they have in there for political capital, and as part of the whole undermining and overthrowing of the government. We have to be very careful not to get caught up in the internal politics, because one thing that we know for certain is that whatever government is in power in Venezuela, the claim to Guyana's territory has remained constant. And so we have to be very careful that we don't take political side. And I think the president in his own way was trying to say that, or said that in that clip that you said there.
Well said, Dr. Hinds. The other thing about this big thing that is in the media right now is these forensic audit reports. And a bizarre situation was discovered by the forensic auditors attached to the Nizam Ali and company when they launched an investigation into the old age pension. They said that the scheme was riddled with strange discrepancies. One, the auditors, according to the report, first noted this weird occurrence when they found that pension books were uplifted by 27 persons who were not even eligible for pension as pensioners. And that tells the magnitude of, not only in the NIS, but there are other agencies, you have seen the reports, big corruption going on. And there are persons saying, as you was talking about just now, the government was moving too slow on dealing with this whole issue of corruption. But there you find 27 ghost persons there receiving benefits when they're not even entitled to it. And so goes the same thing going, what is the government doing about this whole thing about corruption? We heard about the asset recovery unit, and we're hearing about they're waiting on something special to come. My question to you is, especially with NAS, do you think that a commission of inquiry should be raised into that whole situation of the NIS and people's pension?
Well, gosh, we've had so many commissions of inquiry over the last couple of years. No, something has to be done. I recommended in some, I think in one of the newspapers this past week, that what we should do is appoint an anti-corruption body made up of people of impeccable reputation and people who are concerned about clamping out corruption, and that such a body study these audits and recommend to the president, and hopefully by then SARU would be ready, legislation will be passed, SARU will recommend to the president and SARU actions be taken. Now, you know, not every example of chicanery, not every example of mismanagement is corruption. I want to be very clear about that, right? Some of the corruption was done within the law, right? So you do something bad, but you didn't break any rules, right? So we have to be very careful. But they're blatant, out and out corruption in a lot of the reports that we are reading in the audits. And so therefore, I think that this body should be able to recommend action to government. Now, action does not necessarily have to be pull them before the courts. You could suspend them. You could demote them. You other forms of sanction. All right. You should expose them. Let the public know who they are. You see? That's a very good tactic in putting the brake on people who are doing bad things and so forth. But at the end of the day, you've got to do, this is too much. It's too much corruption for a little country like Guyana. I'm saying that, you know, I mean, part of it, I'm ashamed that, you know, we allowed that level of corruption to develop. Look, in 1971, all right, 40 odd years ago, 45 years ago, Mr. Hamilton Green, then a government minister, was accused of using government material to do work on his house or something like that. UC Guyana at that time, who was still Guyana's greatest anti-corruption crusader, took Mr. Green before the ombudsman. Just so that. I mean, when you compare that accusation with what we are seeing now, I mean, that's Sunday school. You understand what I'm saying? I give that example to show that in those days, there were people in the society who were prepared to stand up and to say no corruption in high places. Today, we have a society that has generally become numb to corruption. And in some cases, they have joined it. Because like I said, the average man on the ground who say, look, if you can't beat them, join them. And if some of this money and resources from corruption is trickling down to the ordinary person, you compromise that person. And one of the things that the PPP government was very skillful at doing was to compromise poor people, especially those poor people from their opposite constituency, to compromise them, tie their hand, dirty their hands, and so therefore the kind of corruption, anti-corruption vigor in the society was seriously shaken. So it means, therefore, that this government has to take the lead, because there's not an anti-corruption culture in contemporary Guyanese society. So the government has to take the lead in dealing with this question of corruption. And again, we have to reason with ordinary people that when you engage in corruption for a couple $1,000s, you're denying yourself what the PNUFC calls the good life. You're denying your children, you're denying your children access to a better education, because the funds that are part of the corruption could be used for better schools, more books, better teachers, better instruction. So when you support corruption silently or not silently, you're undermining your own existence.
Well said. As well, Dr. Hinds, you would know that the Walter Rodney Commission report is out. The president has reviewed it. He has sent it to Parliament as well. And we have the big Walter Rodney anniversary coming up. I think it's tomorrow, is it?
Yes, tomorrow, June 13th.
What is happening with that? Where we are? What is the WPA plans on this big celebration, this big observance coming up?
Well, there is a discussion tomorrow at Morehouse that some independent citizens are doing. The WPA will be doing a Walter Rodney lecture next week, Wednesday. It's an annual lecture that we do, discussion, to not just to talk about Walter Rodney, but to talk about the issues and problems that face Guyana. So we are marking the anniversary, as we do every year, by drawing attention to Rodney's contribution, but also drawing attention to the crisis and the difficulties being faced by the country. As far as the Commission of Inquiry report is concerned, the WPA welcomes the report. We want the report to be laid before Parliament and for there to be a debate on the report. But we do not want that debate to be this continued political finger pointing and arguing, whether it's PPP and PNC arguing among themselves and so on. What we want, what we would prefer, is for us to have a discussion in Parliament and hopefully a discussion in the larger society about the implications of the Rodney report. That is, in particular, the question of the use of states by parties and governments against their opponents. It's a problem we have had throughout our independence years. It's a problem that we have in the larger English-speaking Caribbean, and it affects all of us. When the PPP is in office, they use the state against PNC activists and other opposition activists. And when the PNC was in office, they did the same thing and so on. At some point, we've got to stop that cycle. You know, we have to learn from our histories. You know, there is a way in which we have got to talk about our achievements, but also talk about the terrible things that occurred over the last years. And we have to come to that point as Guyanese people. So it's not just about the wonderful things that the PNC under Mr. Burnham did. I've talked about some of them, and I have no problems as somebody who opposed the Burnham government. I can say that, you know, that is that. But I also am saying that there's a contradiction because of these wonderful things that were meant to lift the poor. Right? At the same time, the government became repressive. Right? So there's a contradiction. The socialists, PPP came to power, you know, to lift the socialist morality, and they become what? The most vicious government. Vicious in terms of economic oppression, vicious in terms of the use of the state against opponents. There are more assassinations under the PPP than the PNC and so on and so forth. So both our major political parties have failed us when it comes to the use of force against opponents, against ordinary people. Rodney becomes important here because Rodney is saying that, boy, you can't, democracy is not sustainable if you're beating up your opponents, if you oppressing poor people. Democracy is not sustainable. Good social programs are not sustainable within an authoritarian context. All right? You can't have authoritarian, political authoritarian, and economic economic development at the same time. One weighs down on the other. And so I think as we celebrate the 36th, well, not celebrate, as we mark, we observe the 36th anniversary of the assassination of Walter Rodney, and as we welcome the report of the Commission of Inquiry, we would like the country to reflect on the legacy of Walter Rodney, both in terms of what he attempted to do to transform the society, but in terms of what his assassination says about us, not as a party, not as a government, but as a country. Because in the final analysis, a government assassinates its own when the environment, in a certain sense, nurtures it. All right? And so, therefore, we all of us have to take responsibility. And so, therefore, we want the attention. We want that debate, if and when it comes, to talk about all the assassinations, Ronald Waddell, Crummy Wing, the 3 men in Linden, the 400 and odd ordinary, who are sometimes nameless young men who were gunned down by gangs, who were in bed with the state and so on. Mr. Sassor and so on. Now, all of those point to something something very, very nasty in our immediate past. And so if Rodney can become the vessel through which we can begin to lay those ghosts to bed and to develop a new kind of society where we can go about our business, where Kaichor News can do what it does and not fear that somebody will pass and throw a grenade to kill them. That is the kind of society Rodney would want. That is what he gave his life for. And that is what we in the WPA would like to urge on this moment of the anniversary and of the laying of the Commission of Inquiry into the open space.
Well, we're going to open up our lines now. We have like about 9 minutes more to go on the program. We're going to open up the lines. We're going to ask Mr. Dominic to put up the numbers on the screen. And let's hear what your views are based on what we have just discussed with Dr. Hinds. Let's hear some of the views from the public out there in terms of some of these issues that we have raised. The government 1 year, corruption, Dr. Walter Rodney, you know, and all of these issues and analysis that Dr. Hinds has raised. Let us hear from you, those of you who are listening out there, your comments and so on it as we wrap the program up this afternoon. We have like about 10 minutes more to go, and then we're going to wrap this up and put this to an end. Okay, so the lines will be open. It's going to be on the screen in a second from now, and we're going to see what happens. I hear you in one of your commentaries, you also said in terms of the coalition government, you had made the comparison that Mr. Granger and Mr. Harmon are two individuals, and that I think one of the statements you made as well is that you know, Harmon is a very powerful person in the party, and should something happen, Harmon will be the next person to take over. You think that is going to be?
Well, I can't remember making that comment. I don't know what happens in that regard. I think the point I was trying to make is that we should not reduce our politics to personality, because we often miss the essence, and we often miss how what we're talking about is part and parcel of the institutions of the country.
Well, we can take some calls. I think Dominic have the numbers at the bottom there. You can call us anytime. Now, somebody's calling. Good evening. Missed that. You can call us on the number at the bottom of your screen. Let's hear your thoughts on it. Dominic, I need some help here. Good evening. Welcome to the program. Hello.
Hello?
Yes, good evening.
Yes, sir. I have to move location.
I didn't get that.
Thanks. My name is Caroline Williams, and I listened to Dr. Hinds. I really enjoyed his speech, and I learned a lot from listening to it. And that's all I wanted to say. And this is the kind of speeches we need when we listen to the politics in this country. This is how we will be able to move onward and be mobilized to move onward. I like the fact that a leader is not a manager. He motivates.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. At least somebody, they're listening and they're learning.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, thanks.
Yes, the callers, you can call. The number is still at the bottom of the screen. More's coming in. Caller, good evening. Good afternoon, rather.
Yeah, good afternoon to you.
Yes, sir.
You two fellas. David,
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
I am really enjoying your analysis and what needs to be done in relation to advancing this in a society for everyone to enjoy this good life of which the president speaks. I say this because
Don't you want me to sit down?
in the analysis that you were giving, I recognize that you have struck a very important chord. What happened, there is too much of what is say sowing of discord in the various groups that is preventing, and people need to face the fact, is that we need to exercise something that more appreciation for each other. And nothing is wrong with kind of dissent or opposing if somebody doesn't agree with you. And this idea that you have floated for conversation, and I agree with you fully, that I don't think that the government has done enough in relation to Gaisuku issue. Because, like you have rightly said, if we approach our people, and most of the people that are engaged in the industry are people who are struggling, poor people who are trying to make a living for themselves. And I think that if we approach them in fact, the work has to be done by the people in the industry. That is, you do your research, get your details, get your facts, do your analysis, get your figures, and look, this is fact, and then you go to deliver. Get your personnel, them, get your people who got to be doing this thing to go out there and then tell people, look, if we do this, it's going to be. And I think this idea of Guyanese having the aptitude to appreciate facts and details in relation, as long as somebody sees something can benefit them, they're going to act. And that's the reason why I am saying, even in the case of the city council, I know you don't like how the administration treated them, but I am of the view that if there is a comfortable space and you go there with your goods, people go there and buy. I don't care where they put them. But the point I'm making, if they go to a space, and that's the reason why I'm saying, on the issue of Gaisuku particularly, I don't think the industry, I don't think the people have done enough in relation to, one, get your information right. Get the details. Get all your analysis. 2 years, this is going to be the result. 5 years, this is going to be the result. 10 years, this is going to be the result. But this is what we're going to do. I agree the thing has been a drain. I agree it has been causing a lot of problems. And this whole idea of PPP feel they're going to lose their vote if they go in the Gaisuku and take drastic action, as against the AP and UFC saying, look, we're going to lose, they're going to affect them because they're going to give more currency to the PPP in advancing their cause. It is a situation that's got to be confronted.
Okay, yes. Caller. Thank you very much, caller. Thank you, caller. He said a mouthful in terms of, talking about what we said a while back, and is on point. He's on point.
Oh,
he's
yes,
on point.
definitely.
Caller. Good afternoon, caller.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
I just want to deal with the Rodney issue with Smith. Because
Quickly.
he could have said that Burnham did what he did. Why would he stay in Cayenne? England would have glad to have him. America would have glad to have him. Transport his family, he would have been well off. He could have just said that is Burnham if that is the case. Burnham died, and he still did not do anything. He died until 2002. He's going to sit down in Cayenne and nearly getting killed and all this kind of thing when he could be safe there. There's no reality, there's no smoking gun. That's the one man who admitted and said, well, he did this. He gave him something. That is what the one man said, but he never said Burnham sent him. And there is no evidence of that. This is the case. And even the other person who was supposed to be watching arms. And when it comes to the state being oppressive, a state is a state. The army defends a country. And if people internally, they are watched, because just like thieves are watched, people who want to overthrow a state, you cannot do certain things and don't expect it. It's like going to war and don't expect to get wounded or die. It's some errors I think was made by our people. It made all over the world. In other countries, Mugabe and Jocelyn Nkomo fought one another before they came together, you know.
Okay.
And they were both, Mugabe was the bigger revolutionary army, and then when we got power now, Nkomo soldiers wanted to come in. They fought one another, shoot at one another, and then they came together.
Let me let Dr. Hinds respond
That
to
thing
you.
is a black problem that we have to overdo the personality that Europeans put us in, where we doubt each other.
Let me
We
have
still
Dr.
doubt
Hinds,
today. Thank you.
caller. Uh-huh.
Well, the caller express a view that I think is part of this society. I don't agree with it. I don't agree because it happens all over the world and because it happened here and it happened then. My point is that it has to stop. All right? What is overthrowing a government? When you stand up with a placard there, you're saying that I don't like this government. When you go out and vote, all right, you're saying you don't like this government. If the call is referring to revolution and so on, we overthrew slavery. We overthrew colonialism. We stand up and we resist against that which is wrong. You know, and if you're going to criminalize resistance, then we might as well take what we get.
Caller, you on the air?
Hi, guys. Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
It's Hinds.
Yes, good afternoon.
I always, appreciate you for your, I would say, boldness. But, you know, I always looking for somebody to be more bold towards the black cause. In the sense I want to say like this, I don't see really, truly, anybody really, truly represent the black people in a full way. Because I know what will come. People going to vilify you. Maybe you might be even killed. Maybe who knows. But I find that we left in the wilderness as other people looking after their rights and this rights and it's our rights. And we find ourselves always got to get a shit in this thing. And, you know, something you read in America, you see people truly pushing the belly out for blacks in there. But I find people half starting here and just cutting out. I mean, I look at the Indians and wherever they achieve, I know for a fact they have people who are there for them, even though they tell them what to do and it might be political or be morally wrong. But I have this strength about them, which we lacking of. Now when I see sometimes one, I come to mind of one, he was very bold in time that that era. People would like to get snuffled at any time. Even now, I won't think so, but I did the same time. That era there, you know, I spoke to him already about it. I said, sometimes I see the Siwaz and said, man, we never did the Siwaz alone to me, you know, to me. I was fearful about him. And why did we always got to be fearful about when people really truly represent black people? I know you're a doctor controlling these black human rights and human being more authority, but I feel in one note that you should be running for president the next time, man, because we need somebody to truly, and not because of a racial thing, because a lot of people feel black people because they talk black. I talk black because of being put down because of black man. I'm supposed to talk black. I am crying out. I'm a decent citizen, law-abiding citizen. Never got a conviction. I always just try to do the right thing. But still I be put down. Anyhow, I wish you all the success in your playing this and speaking and lift up with the government will be able to listen to you and you know, come out of this black and Indian thing so we could get ahead in this country. We need that. But
One people.
Gracias.
Yeah.
Doctor, as we close up, your comments on that, and then your thoughts on how you're seeing us down the road in for better Guyana.
Well, you know, the brother makes a very important point that there's a fear of blackness not only in Guyana but all over the world. People cringe when you talk about blackness, and there is a history to that, and so forth. And those of us like myself who include the defense of blackness in my praxis, because I don't just talk about blackness. Some people say, well, you always talk about blackness and race and so on, which is absolutely not true.
Yes.
But every time you include that in your conversation, there are people who dismiss you and so on. But I continue to believe that those who are at the bottom should be lifted. Poor people of all races, and most black people are poor. Most black people, as the brother said, face structural problems in this country and onwards. And we have to, at some point, talk about it. You know, there is oppression, there is poverty in all sections. Amerindian, East Indian, Africans, and so on. But we experience those things differently. We experience poverty society differently, and we have to talk about that in a serious way. Where do I see Guyana? I'm hopeful. Guyana is all we have in terms of what we can call home. We are part of the larger world, but you know, if you do not humanize where you live, you can't make any serious contribution to the rest of the world. That's why Walter Rodney came back to Guyana, because he was talking and aiding revolution all over the world. But he says, if I cannot revolutionize my own society, then my contribution to the rest of the world would not be effective. And so therefore I have hope. I think this government has a wonderful opportunity to lead a transformation. The government doesn't transform society, but the government can facilitate, and they can lead in this regard in terms of making Guyana a place where people are proud of. Look at the sense of pride that you know, half of the population expressed during the 50th anniversary. These are people who are saying, but we still poor, that you're still beating us down, but we are Guyanese and we're going to celebrate it, right? The other side of the other half of the population chose not to be part. That in itself is a problem. It's not that Indians are less patriotic than black, but we all become prisoners of politics, you know. Rodney was overthrowing the government, so they tried to kill him. And the brother who said that, I'm sure, is a wonderful brother. But if he were to examine what he's saying, he would be killed every day. Because if somebody perceive that you are doing something wrong and they kill you, what kind of barbarism? So I'm saying that to make the point that we have to be able to say that we love ourselves without saying we hate the other person. We have to be saying that we love being black without saying Indian people are bad and vice versa. We have to be able to say that Mr. Burnham helped to lift poor people in this country at a certain point. But we have to also have the courage to listen to others who may say, but he also helped to make the state a kind of authoritarian state, right? We have to have a conversation with our people about our past. You know, the United States of America, they had enslaved 12-15% of their population. All right, they did some of the worst things in terms of invading other countries, but Americans love America. All right, and so we have to be able to say, in our negatives, given our negatives, in our diversity, we have to celebrate what we have. Our foreparents came across the Middle Passage against their will. East Indians came here for a better life. Amerindians were here before the rest of us got here. We all own this land, this space, and we are never going to go anywhere until we decide to respect each other. Now, I am not one of those people who believe to have a multiracial society, you know, African have to wear a dhoti and an Indian got to wear a dashiki. I'm not into that kind of thing. What I'm into is mutual respect. That Indians must respect the humanity of blacks, and blacks must respect the humanity of Indians. And we all must respect the humanity of Amerindians and Portuguese and Chinese. Because I think that's the problem. The problem is that we do not respect each other as human beings. And so I would want that message to go out loud and clear to our children, especially. To let our children grow up. Let an Indian child know that an African child is as precious as him or her. And that Amerindian child who is locked in the wilderness of our country, all right, is not an alien. That child has as much dignity as all of us. And so, for me, we can solve our racial differences by paying attention on dignity. And if we talk about dignity, the poor people of this country, we start by saying, how does this policy affect the poor and ordinary people? And if it shows that that policy is going to cause harm to poor people and ordinary people, we change course. When we begin to do that, Guyana will become the place that all of us can say, This is our homeland. This is what our ancestors fought for, and we are extremely proud of it. We will say what is wrong. We will say when we're doing things that are not wholesome, but we love you, Guyana, and that love will be genuine. It wouldn't be a surface love, a feel-good love, a genuine love of country, of people, and of dignity for all of us.
And that is where Dr. Hinds and persons like him would like to see Guyana go. I trust that you would like to see Guyana head down that road in the not too distant future, so that all of us can really truly say that Guyana is not just for the Africans and the East Indians, but it's for all of us as one people, one nation, one destiny. Thank you very much, Dr. Hinds, for being in the program this afternoon. Thank you, our viewers. We can't take any more calls. We're out of time. We're way out of time. And we're going to see you back here again for another program of Tough Enough here on Safe TV Channel 2. For all the viewers across the globe as well, we want to thank you for staying tuned to us as well. And we wish you all the best for the remainder of the week. Bye-bye and God bless.